The Lineberry cart is almost done, and by the end of this video, we'll be putting the finishing touches on it. Let's jump right in. Almost every project I have done, or will do, starts with a heavy coat of boiled linseed oil. You can't mess this up, and the surface doesn't have to be spotless. But before starting, I used my orbital sander and sanded the top and aprons up to 220 grit. After that, you can just start lathering it on. I just use a rag and just flood the surface. When most of it dries, after a couple days, you take a dry cloth and just wipe off any excess. I do this because I feel the oil really makes the grain and figure just pop out. After the boiled linseed is dry enough, I begin to lay out the holes that will mount the main wheels and the casters. All I'm doing here is finding the center and then marking where the holes where the wheel bracket bolts will need to be installed. I then remove the wheels and start to drill my pilot holes. I start small, maybe 1/8 of an inch bit, and work up to 3/8 of an inch hole. I do this to limit the amount of tear out you will get if you went right into the bigger bit. Now all these holes will be unseen from anyone, but I didn't want to risk tearing out down the whole grain. On to laying out the caster wheels. There's not much difference here. I just find center, align the wheel bracket, and mark where the holes need to go. Now I just rinse and repeat for the other side, and then it's on to the first coat of finish. I have two go-to finishes for my pieces. One is Waterlock Satin. It's really nice but also really expensive. The other is General Finishes ArmrSeal Satin. For the money, it's truly an awesome finish and for about half the price. I use ArmrSeal for almost all my projects and I can't speak more highly of it. And for those that are used to using the big box store Minwax, be ready to see what a true finish really feels like. Okay, enough about the product. My first coat is always the heaviest. Even with the pre-finished boiled linseed oil, the first coat of finish gets absorbed almost instantly. What I try to do is to get enough on the wood, then spread it out evenly. After you've spread it out around enough with your brush, while more bristled, you run the entire flat surface only using the weight of the brush. This, I found, gives the nice, even coat you're looking for. Now between the coats with the brush, which I did 2 on this piece, I perform a light sanding with a 4-0 steel wool. You can use the steel wool from the big box store that comes in the bag, but I prefer to use the wool made for woodworking, which comes in a roll. I'll link all the materials I use in this description. This step helps improve the smoothness and the finish that really helps with applying the other coats. When the steel wool rub down is finished, it will leave a bunch of small steel wool stuff on the surface, which needs to be removed. I start with air and blow out all the crevices, and then I finish with a tack cloth to get ready for the next step in the process. Next is to apply the letters that appear on the side of the card from Lineberry themselves. Now, since this was a wedding present, I thought this would be a good opportunity to have my cousin's name along with their wedding date instead of what was originally there. When I initially started out, I sprayed the paint and then waited for it to dry before removing the template. However, after a couple applications, I found it better to spray the paint, then remove the template almost right after. This, I felt, left less time for the paint to bleed around the letters in the corners. I learned even more as I continued this exercise, and found out that aligning the letters first by scotch taping them all together first, then aligning the top of the letter to the underside edge of the top. Since I had one set of letters, meaning from A to Z, I had to paint the names in the segments. Making sure the previous segment lined up with the next segment was hard when it was covered in painter's tape originally. For lettering, I used the closest font I could find that matched the Lineberry cart lettering. Look at the description for details. I taped them all together with painter's tape with the correct spacing, then covered the surrounding area with paper or plywood. After that, it was just a simple spray, paint, in flat black. Once all the letters were done, I moved on to the last coat of finish. For this, I opted to wipe it on, as I find the last coat easier, cleaner, and requires less work after, since the wood has already formed a shell over it, and the need for a lot of finish is kind of unnecessary. The next stage in the process is the last, and it's just installing all the hardware you completed in the first set of videos. We start off by assembling the caster wheels with adding the new set screw we made and the new cotter pin. Then, when the caster wheels are finished, we move on to installing the big center wheels. Simply drop them in place, add a carriage bolt, a lock washer, and a nut to each bolt, and we're done. If you're looking for older bolts, I've made a supplemental video on making those new shiny zinc plated bolts from the big box stores look old. So go check that out if you want to bring some bright shiny silver bolts back to an old school unique patina finish. I then perform the same process for the caster wheels. Just a note here, for those that don't know the reason for the set screw on the caster wheel, it's because these carts were used for industrial settings and rocked back and forth like a seesaw to overcome small obstacles in their path. In order to level out the cart, you need to be able to lock the wheel from moving up and down, hence the set screw. Last but not least, it's mounting the corner brackets. Once this is done on all four corners, we are finished with the cart. It's been a long journey, and I hope you enjoyed watching this series. Please post your finished cart pictures in the comments, as I would love to see what others have done. Till next project, I bid you farewell.